from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
Checking San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Russia's invasion gets more brazen and more bloody. A children's hospital and maternity ward, the latest target in the Ukrainian port town of Mariupol. This after a Ukrainian official says they're open to meeting Russia's demands for neutrality, but only if there's an immediate ceasefire. Plus, Bitcoin bounces back as President Biden signs an executive order on digital assets. We'll break down what's in that plan and what it means for the future of cryptocurrency. And Amazon soaring after hours. The company's board approves a 20-for-1 stock split. What it means later this hour. All of that, but first, buying the dip. Stocks rally despite looming fears about global inflation, in part after a top Ukrainian foreign policy aide said President Zelensky is open to talking about Russia's demand for neutrality, as long as it comes with an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of troops. Our Ritika Gupta here to walk us through the day. Ritika, walk us through the day.
Yes, Emily. Well, like you said, a big bounce back for U.S. equities off the back of that. Actually, the biggest rebound going back to June of 2020, and tech really leading the charge here. But many are questioning, is this just a dead cat bounce? Is this going to be more of a sustained rally? Well, if you take a look at the bond market, could suggest the latter, just in the fact that yields have been rising over the past 4 days. We actually sit on that 10-year at 1.95%, so actually close to the highs that we've seen this year. But really today, of course, the story was in the commodities market coming off those highs. WTI plunging some 12% in the session today, and a lot of those energy stocks moving lower in sympathy. That brings me to my terminal chart today of the day here. So it's really comparing the weekly percent changes of energy stocks within the S&P 500 to their tech counterparts. And what you can see is we've had a string of where energy stocks have just outperformed tech, but many investors are concerned just about the speed of the moves and how energy's risen so fast that we actually have Ryan Gabrinsky in a note in his strategist note saying that the average energy stock is just 2% off the analyst's 12-month target. So that, in some sense, could suggest a pullback, Emily. And finally, I just want to talk about some breaking news that we just had in the past 20 minutes or so. This is regarding Amazon, of course, announcing that it is going to go ahead with a 20-to-1 stock split and the repurchasing of up to $10 billion worth of shares. I mean, all the big tech names seem to be doing those stock splits these days. Now, Amazon is joining the ranks. This is actually going to be the first one going back to 1999. You can see the stock getting a nice pop there post-market. Emily.
All right, Ritika, thank you for that roundup. Meantime, Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemning the Kremlin's plan for humanitarian corridors leading to Russia as absurd today, as he demanded that Ukrainians be allowed to safely flee these cities under attack. He spoke earlier in Washington.
Our goal is to end the war, not to expand it, including potentially expand it to NATO territory. We want to make sure that it's not prolonged to the best of our ability. Otherwise, it's going to turn even deadlier, involve more people, and I think potentially even make things harder to resolve in Ukraine itself.
Bloomberg's Bill Ferry is joining us now from Washington. And Bill, the invasion already getting bloodier and more brazen, and you have some new reporting on additional sanctions that the U.S. is considering. What's next?
Right. As this conflict continues to grind on, we know that Biden administration officials are considering whether to sanction Rosatom. That's one of the premier suppliers of uranium, not just to Western Europe, but also to the United States. It's a major energy company. It would be another big blow, but it would also be something that would have ripple effects here in the United States. Rosatom provides over 15% of the uranium used in U.S. nuclear power plants, and something close to over 20% of the enriched uranium. So these are the kind of things that nuclear plants typically stockpile, but it would still force a lot of efforts to find alternative sources of uranium for nuclear power plants, both in Europe and in the United States.
Meantime, you got this children's hospital and maternity ward being bombed, all of this putting additional pressure on the United States. What more can the United States do?
Well, that bombing you mentioned is the latest sign of increased use of unguided munitions by the Russian forces, who are have still not managed to capture any big cities, but are continuing to press down and starting to surround places like Kyiv. The U.S. is, continuing to try to work with NATO allies to get air defense systems and defensive weapons into Ukraine. There was some talk from Polish authorities about swapping their MiG fighters or sending their MiG fighters to Germany for delivery to Ukraine. The U.S. has essentially ruled that out for the time being, saying it would only serve to escalate the conflict outside of Ukraine's borders, essentially bringing the rest of Europe into the war.
How significant is Ukraine saying it's open to a diplomatic solution here? At the same time, they're saying they won't surrender a single inch of territory, and we're now almost 2 weeks into this war, and as you say, no major cities have been captured.
Right. I mean, I think ultimately Russia still has the firepower and the numbers on their side, although it just seems like things have definitely not gone the way they probably expected it to. The Ukrainians have repeatedly said that they're open to talks, that they're open to having a ceasefire, the withdrawal of forces. It's really, I think, more on the Russian side. We have not seen the Russian interest in doing so. And there's the big uncertainty is what would happen in these eastern areas that were controlled by separatists where Russian troops have been now, whether that would ever return to Ukraine or not. That would be a key issue in those kind of talks.
All right, Bill Ferries for us in Washington. Thank you for those updates. Meantime, Bitcoin jumping above 42,000, spurred by optimism about a U.S. overhaul of crypto regulation that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has called historic. President Biden's executive order mandates government agencies to take a closer look at issues from developing a potential digital U.S. dollar to combating illicit finance. Our Ben Bain here now with the details. What does this executive order actually mean when you look at the fine print for the broader crypto industry, Ben?
Well, looking at the price action today, I think you mentioned earlier that Bitcoin was up about 10% at one point. I think the initial feedback is pretty positive from the crypto industry. For the longest time, there's been this concern when you talk to people at these various businesses that the U.S. was really gonna come out swinging and not take a deliberate approach to regulating crypto assets. What the Biden administration has essentially done today is task the federal government, and not just the SEC or some of the financial regulators, with taking a pretty broad look at this asset class. I think from the crypto industry's perspective, that's probably pretty good news. They've been complaining that the SEC and some of the other financial regulators are very much taking a heavy hand here, and they continue to talk about the way the government should be focused more on what they say are some of the positive aspects of cryptocurrencies. What we saw from the Biden administration is basically a look at how regulations might be coming, but also a call on places like the Commerce Department to look at things that can be done to ensure that the United States continues to be competitive in this area. So overall, from the crypto industry's perspective, and certainly looking at a 10% bounce in Bitcoin, certainly was pretty good news today for them.
So let's talk about the reaction, and we have any details on what the crypto community is saying about this, and also what about lawmakers?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see here. You saw Republicans, including some of the highest-ranking members of the Senate Banking Committee, obviously, pretty key in any type of regulation that might be coming down the pike here, actually applauding what they saw from the Biden administration, which these days in Washington, isn't common at all. So it was kind of this, this moment where everyone said, found something they kind of liked in this order. At the same time, you could see a situation where that could also be read as nothing in here that's basically saying the crackdown is imminent. So we're going to see over the next 6 months or so, whether any real action in terms of writing new regulations, any type of sweeping policy framework is actually put in place. And oh, by the way, that's going to take us right up into November. We're going to have midterm elections here in Washington. And, the whole political landscape in terms of writing new laws and rules is going to change quite a bit.
Well, let's talk about that. Would you say what the White House has done here could be called a game changer for the industry?
So, some are saying that. Certainly, there are lots of responses out there today saying, this is a really big deal. And if you think about it, this is definitely the highest level of attention that the U.S. government has given to cryptocurrencies. To have the President of the United States signing an executive order can be seen as essentially acknowledging that this asset class is here to stay. It's not a flash in the pan type of things, as some in traditional finance might have, said it was going to be at one point. On the other hand, it really remains to be seen. This executive order calls for reports that could come as long as 6 months down the road. At that point, it'll be up to the administration, various agencies, financial regulators to actually put in place any new rules. So like most things in Washington, this could take months or years. And of course, there's going to be lots of lobbying from businesses and interests all across this issue to try to make things work out how they want it to.
All right, Ben Bain for us there in Washington. Ben, thank you for your reporting on this. Coming up, keeping in touch with friends, family, employees under siege in Ukraine. How one company is trying to keep communication lines open to make sure humanitarian aid gets to where it needs to go. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Thousands are trapped in towns surrounding Kyiv as Russian forces continue to encroach on the capital. They're running out of food and other essential items as they wait days upon days for a safe exit. Take a listen.
В Буче, Ирпене, Ворзеле и Гостомеле occupied by Russian forces. Проблема в том, что у многих людей заканчиваются продукты питания и воды. И они понимают, что они могут быть, были прецеденты, когда люди, волонтеры, которые пытались вывести людей с Бучи, их расстреляли. Просто волонтеры. И последний раз, когда мы туда проехали 3 дня назад, я вез колонну с автобусами, с микроавтобусами, легковыми автомобилями, в которых были продукты питания, медицина, детское питание. Мы попали под обстрел, колонна русских танков и БТРов. Мы попали под окружение, все наши автомобили остались там. Некоторые очень сильно посекло. Ну и сложность заключается в том, что Ирпень приблизительно 30% контролируется русскими силами, а все остальное, они, если хотят, они стреляют. К примеру, позавчера вот есть на фоне автомобиль, который прилетело 2 осколка. В нем не было военных, в нем было исключительно продукты питания и медицина, которые мы везли. Сложность в том, что они стреляют не только по военным. И поэтому много людей просто боится выйти. Поэтому мы пытаемся в первую очередь направлять людей к этому мосту, там встречаем, и наши силы отстреливаются и пытаются уберечь максимальное количество жизней.
And as more people attempt to leave Ukraine or find shelter within the country, it is of the essence to keep communication channels open so humanitarian aid can get to those who need it most. MessageBird is helping keep businesses connected across Ukraine and is now being used to coordinate and meet a broad range of needs, from getting SIM cards to people, along with supplies like medicine, blankets, and even transportation from place to place. Founder and CEO Robert Viss with me now for more on how his company is doing all of this work. Now, as I understand it, Robert, you work with all of the major social channels: WhatsApp, Instagram, Telegram. What kinds of communications are you seeing between businesses, between customers and businesses in Ukraine specifically?
Hi, Emily, and thank you for having me on the show. Look, before MessageBird was being used primarily for omni-channel B2B communications. Today, we're seeing a lot of NGOs, communities using us for all sorts of help. As you said, it can be simple things from organizing, coordinating medicines, blankets, transportation. We're just trying to provide our services to as many businesses as possible at the moment to help out.
So what does that mean? How are you supporting these businesses who have this flood of requests at this time?
Well, several different ways. As a company, we provide customer service tooling, so different ways for people to coordinate on top of our platform. So we're obviously providing that for free now to those companies, businesses. But this isn't just businesses, to be honest. It's just as much just people trying to help out. I mean, if you think about it, it's about 2 million refugees have now come into Europe. So a lot of people are trying to help out in different ways, and we're trying to coordinate as quickly as possible. At the same time, we launched our own fund to help out. So our employees are helping out. I'm trying to organize other tech founders to come together, and all of us use our knowledge, companies, to try to lend a hand in this terrible situation.
So this $10 million NGO fund that you mentioned, what's your hope about how this will help?
Look, the fund is broader. We're looking to deploy the capital in the next 2 years, but right now it's needed as much as ever. So we're trying to do anything we can for the community. I think more broadly than the money, what we're really trying to do is just stand up. I think it's important for CEOs, founders to speak up. I think the technology sector is uniquely positioned to help out. We've all built amazing companies that we can do stuff with. I'm working together with, for example, in the Netherlands, the founder of Bank, which is an online bank. He's doing amazing work trying to get refugees now bank accounts so that we can coordinate money, something simple, because obviously their bank accounts in Ukraine don't actually work anymore. Or the founder of Picnic, which is an online supermarket, who has all sorts of supply chain and logistics to coordinate funds. I think it's initiatives like that where we're really focused to try to help out.
Well, speaking of standing up, this clampdown that we've seen on services across Russia, we've seen a number of companies take a stand. Do you have any exposure in Russia? Are you cutting off any of your services to Russian businesses and users?
Yeah, we have pretty much immediately. Look, I'll be honest, it's 4% of our revenue, so it's we're a $500 million company. It's significant, but it's not going to kill our business. But I think anything that we can do globally to say no and to stand for peace, I think is important. Obviously, I would say that the Russian people inside the country have absolutely nothing to do with this, so it's sad for them too. At the same time, it's, I guess, the only peaceful protest that we can do is by stopping services to the Russian community.
Right. Now, I know you're joining us from Amsterdam. You do have a team in Ukraine. How big is that team? How are they doing? What is the situation there, and how are you helping them?
We didn't have a very big team in Ukraine. Luckily, all of our employees are outside of the country. We were able to get them out pretty quickly, but they still have family there. So far as I know, everybody is doing okay considering the circumstances. But it's horrifying. I mean, we have families where you literally hear the air alarms go off. I don't know how you call it in English, but it's just it's 2022 and we're having a war at the borders of Europe. It's crazy.
Air sirens, common sound now across the country. All right, founder and CEO of MessageBird, Robert Viss, thank you for joining us and sharing the work that you're doing there. Coming up, Amazon soaring in late trading after the company says the board approved a 20-for-1 stock split. Details on that next. This is Bloomberg. Amazon splits its stock, sending shares soaring. This as the e-commerce giant announced it will stop sending products to Russia and cut off Prime Video to Russian customers. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Brad Stone for more on this. Brad, I want to start with the stock splits here. Obviously, we just saw Alphabet do something like this earlier this year. Unlike Amazon, though, to do a stock split, why are they doing this and what does it mean?
Well, it's interesting. Jeff Bezos, for 15 years, seemed to really resist this kind of financial engineering. It shouldn't mean anything, right? One share of Amazon stock at 3,000 is equal to 20 shares at 150. But in practice, a lower stock price makes the stock more attractive to retail investors and also employees. You've got 1 million warehouse workers who have an option of including equity in their compensation. And this, instead of a fractional share, they get a whole share. So there are lots of reasons to do it. And the fact that the stock is down by 8% over the last 12 months, and the fact that investors are responding favorably, they did today
and to Google's announcement last month, it's evidence for why Andy Jassy maybe wants to rethink some of that orthodoxy at Amazon.
Right, improving that accessibility, at least psychologically. I also want to ask you about Amazon's moves in Russia, stopping sending products to Russia, cutting off Prime Video. How significant is this for Amazon? How big a business do they have there? And who will this really impact?
Yeah, I mean, not to call it a nothing burger, but to put it in perspective, no data centers in the country, no offices in the country. There's no such thing as Amazon.ru. If you're an Amazon customer in Russia, you're probably ordering from the website in Germany, and products are getting shipped to you from the fulfillment centers in Poland. So, it's limited. Amazon's taking a stand here like a lot of other companies. And to the extent that it's impacting Amazon customers, it's probably upper middle class Russian consumers who are using the foreign Amazon website.
Okay. Now, third story, a big Amazon story today, Amazon being accused of lying to Congress about how they use third-party data and have now been referred to the Department of Justice. What does this mean?
It was sort of an open secret that Amazon, which is very decentralized, you had employees who were basically breaking Amazon policy and using internal data tools to promote private label Amazon products. And when Bezos and some other Amazon executives were hauled in front of the congressional subcommittee investigating antitrust, they wouldn't really own up to it. Amazon's so secretive. They talked around it. They talked about studying the issue. They were being very Amazon-like, and then they've never released any subsequent reports. So, the charge here, is that they lied. They clearly weren't upfront with what was happening, with the employees who were kind of sticking their hands in the data cookie jar. And now congressional investigators want some accountability for that.
All right, well, we'll be following that story. Again, Amazon shares way up after hours on the back of that stock split announcement are Brad Stone, who of course wrote a couple of books on Amazon. Brad, thank you. Coming up, GM names founder of Cruise, Kyle Vogt, the CEO of its self-driving car company that it acquired a few years ago. How close are we to autonomous cars on the roads? He'll join us next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Cruise, the autonomous vehicle company majority owned by General Motors, named co-founder Kyle Vogt its full-time CEO. He's back in the top spot since Dan Ammann left Cruise back in December after disagreements with GM CEO Mary Barra. Kyle with us now for his first interview since taking back the helm. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. So, in light of Dan's departure, and of course your very long history with this company, what is your vision, and is there anything that you plan to do differently?
Well, thanks for having me, Emily. Fortunately, our vision remains unchanged. We're still working on bringing driverless cars to deployment at scale. And it's been a really exciting year for us. Just in the last few months, we did our first driverless rides on public roads in a major U.S. city. It's a first for any company. We've got really ambitious plans to scale from here to be in more locations, more cities, and make a really great product for people.
And given the context of Dan's departure, how would you describe your relationship with Mary Barra and whether you both are on the same page?
Well, the GM leadership team, including Mary, have been really supportive, and we share this vision. It's obvious if you look at the status quo, we're not in a great place when it comes to car accidents in the U.S. and basically transitioning to an electric vehicle fleet across both personally owned vehicles and rideshare. And we all believe that autonomous rideshare is the way to get there, and a way to get there really quickly. And it's also a really big business opportunity for a company like GM, or really any major company who's looking to get into the transportation space.
Talk to us about Cruise Origin, how production is going, and is there any sense of when we'll see Origin on U.S. roads?
Yeah, the Cruise Origin is an amazing vehicle. It's meant for rideshare. So you sit in it, you've got tons of leg room. The seats face each other, lots of cabin space. And so it's optimal for things like shared rides where you might be in there with another person, but we can really drive the cost down when you do those kind of rides. So it's an awesome vehicle. We're doing testing with prototypes right now on closed courses. And early next year, I think you may start to see the first production vehicles roll off the line and hopefully go into deployment.
Why, in your view, is Cruise's technology better than what Waymo has to offer, or Tesla, or Zoox?
You know, it's really hard to compare different AV companies. And I think the answer is just, you know, when you can pull out your phone and use one of these products, first of all, we'll know who's ahead in terms of deployment. But then also the thing is right now, you can't really compare them side by side. And I do think when you experience this technology, if it's anything like what our first users have seen, they're blown away. It feels like magic. They want to use it again and again. And we intend to differentiate both on the product experience, creating a really great experience that's potentially better than our competitors, but much better than the status quo using rideshare services. And I think that'll be really compelling. I think people are going to like it.
Now, as I understand it, Cruise has at least 5 permits from the DMV and the CPUC. You can transport passengers without a driver behind the wheel, but you can't charge a fare, or you can transport passengers and charge a fare, but you need to have a safety driver. Are the regulations just too complicated right now to make a lot of progress?
We did a good job on winding the California permit process right there, but you know, we're one permit away from being able to charge fares and do commercial operation. But as of today, we have people using the app, using the service, you know, so we're getting a sense for what those customers are going to do and what they like. And I think while today we're kind of hung up on this permitting process, that's a very ephemeral problem and going to go away. We're going to work with the regulators and get through these things. And then you're just going to see, you know, this product start to appear in more places and starts to be something that people use, you know, in their daily lives and just going to become normal. I think the discussion about permitting is important today since it's the first time any company has tried to go through this and get permits from California regulators. But I think that's going to be behind us pretty soon.
What's the next big market for Cruise after the United States?
Well, we'll see. I think that the priority for us is, you know, look, you know, even in San Francisco, a tech-centric city, people have never seen a car driving around without anyone behind the wheel. You know, there's people on the sidewalk that look at these vehicles and they're taking pictures, they're looking at them, they're excited, I think, about the future, but it's also, you know, a little bit unusual. And so I think for us, we really want to make sure we nail this in San Francisco, not only in a way that works for the city, but works for riders. And it's really compelling and they want to come back again and again. And then we're really going to put a lot of ammo into this and try to scale it out in a lot of places really quickly. But our goal is to make it work really well and make it work really well here in San Francisco first.
Any updates on Dubai? The World Expo in Dubai wraps at the end of the month, and one of the big themes is mobility.
Yeah, Dubai has been, or the RTA in Dubai has been a great partner, and we're still on track for deployment there. I think it's a great opportunity to introduce, you know, the future of transportation to, you know, a city and government that's really excited about doing that. So we can't wait.
So look, I think the big question regular consumers have is when will self-driving cars, when will self-driving cruises, for example, be on the road and I can take advantage of it? You know, how far out is that more mainstream reality? How many years?
Well, we're starting small. I think the important thing is to get this working, make sure everyone is responding well to it, and the product itself meets expectations. But right now, if you live in San Francisco, you can go to getcruise.com and jump on the wait list. We've already done hundreds of rides with members of the public, and these AVs, actually dozens of them, are out every single night now carrying passengers around San Francisco. So it's here. It's not you know, universally distributed or equally distributed, but it's here in small bits and pieces, and I think it's going to surprise people how quickly that becomes generally available and that many people who live or work in San Francisco get a chance to use it.
All right. Kyle Vogt, CEO of Cruise, once again, and also, of course, the co-founder. Thanks for bringing your vision to us, Kyle. Coming up, President Biden and crypto, the fine print in his executive order and what it means for the broader industry next. This is Bloomberg. More now on President Biden's executive order on crypto, which sent Bitcoin bouncing right back up. I want to get into it all with our crypto contributor, Sonali Basak. Sonali, this could be kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it could be a big deal. And if you see Bitcoin prices, certainly the market thinks it is. If you take a look, you have a more than 9% jump in Bitcoin over the last 24 hours. It is still down on the 7-day period, but a significant lift here, more than the other assets. If you flip up the board and take a look at Ethereum, for example, also getting a lift about 6% or so. But the one interesting thing to me is while those assets have gotten a lift, Tether and stablecoins more largely have not seen as much of a lift, are pretty stable on the day, but again, stable on the week as well. So what are the safe havens here? Let's get someone else's take here. We're going to bring in Marty Chavez on this. He is the vice chairman at Sixth Street Partners, really a pioneer when it comes to technology and money. Marty, thank you so much for joining us. There's a lot of criticism about the executive order that came out of the White House. On one hand, it's been hailed as a watershed moment, but on the other hand, it has also been criticized as short on details. What's your take?
Sonali, we've talked about this topic before. I've been saying for a long time, the best thing that could possibly happen to digital regulation, digital assets is the appropriate amount of regulation. Sure, the executive order did not give us a lot of detail. It mostly directed a variety of organizations in the government to do more work and do more study, and that's great. There is, we expect a Treasury paper forthcoming later this year that's going to have a lot more detail. But I would say that at the root of my concerns, and you and I have talked about this before, are really the stable coins. Right? The stable coins are a form of currency peg, and currency pegs have not been successful. They work right up until the moment that they don't work. And there's certainly not a lot of detail. I'm not sure there's any in the executive order about stable coins. And to my mind, the appropriate regulation of stable coins, which I would see as a kind of narrow bank, so we actually know what are the assets backing them and what are the mechanisms for those assets. I think that's going to be hugely important. And until we have that, I don't know how investable the whole space of digital assets is from my perspective. But once we have a foundation for the stable coins that looks like narrow banking and appropriate regulation, I think it's going to be a part of an immensely important, long secular trend, the dematerialization of everything.
Marty, what about what we're seeing here in terms of investment into things like the Ukraine DAO, the way that investors have really been able to mobilize and raise money at scale when people have not been able to access currency in the traditional way?
Well, first, let's just start by just acknowledging the pure horror of what's going on in Ukraine, and the sympathy. And the sympathy isn't even the word for the suffering that's happening over there. And to the extent that cryptocurrency can partially mitigate some aspects of that suffering, I think it's huge. It does show you that there's ways to move money internationally with cryptocurrency, which we've all known that are interesting, that don't require intermediaries. Of course, it brings up all kinds of concerns about the enforceability of sanctions, and there's all kinds of discussions about Russian wallets and the exchanges, and that's complicated.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what you think about that and the role that crypto plays here when there are sanctions and really lots of governments around the world trying to restrict the flow of capital. Is crypto going to fix or make that worse? So,
restricting the flow of capital, sanctions. Look, this is something that governments do. Personally, to my mind, we have heard commentators say the U.S. is not playing fair with the dollar. Well, I don't know that playing fair is really what the discussion is about when Russia unprovoked invaded Ukraine. And so cryptocurrencies do provide this mechanism. I think it's important as a matter of sovereignty to have the right amount of regulation. I don't like using the term cryptocurrencies. I don't think they're currencies. I think they're digital assets. The currency is a different thing, and this is something else that I've been saying for a long time. Digitizing the US dollar in an appropriate way that respects identity, privacy, know your client, anti-money laundering, sanctions regimes that bolsters the Fed's tools for macroeconomic policy and the United States' tools for geopolitical policy. That's hard. And getting that right is really important. But to me, It's not an option. Do we want to digitize the US dollar? That dematerialization journey has to continue. It's important for US leadership. It's important as a matter of innovation. And getting it right is extremely hard.
To what extent is it a question of national security? You have millions of people who are flocking to China's central bank digital currency as we speak. And I'm wondering if the U.S. doesn't catch up and do the same, to what extent does that start to shift global financial powers over to China?
I worry about this a lot, Sonali. The dollar status as the global reserve asset is not written in stone. It has persisted for 100 years. Not that the historical pattern needs to repeat, but about every 100 years, there's a different global reserve asset. And I've been saying for a few years now, digitizing the US dollar in an appropriate way, is essential. It's not just another form factor, right? To me, that's like saying a starship and a bicycle are just two different forms of transportation. No big difference between the two, right? A digital dollar, potentially a programmable dollar, is a completely different thing than the inert paper dollar that we currently have. The only two forms of central bank money we have today are the notes and Fed funds in Fed master accounts. Introducing another form that is just like the dollar, but it's digital. We don't need the paper symbolizing it anymore. That's really important, but getting the details right, like the know your client, anti-money laundering, what are the right amounts? Can they be removed? Can you apply sanctions? If so, what's the process? Like designing all of this, it has to be thoughtful,
Marty,
and it's really hard, and it's essential.
We have just about another minute, 30 seconds here. What about the investability of digital assets until we get to that regulatory point that you're talking about? Are you comfortable? Are your clients and rivals comfortable with getting into them?
No, many clients and rivals are comfortable. But when I am thinking about it from the Sixth Street point of view, we see the right amount of regulation as essential. I'll give you an analogy. Before airplanes were regulated and the safety of airplanes were regulated, you were taking your life into your hands every time you got on a commercial flight. And so having all the rules that we currently have about rebuilding the airplanes every so often, how they have to be maintained in the checklists and all, yes, it was expensive and cumbersome to comply with that, but it was game changing. It is the condition precedent for the industry to really grow and to be what it needs to be. And so I would say the executive order is a great step along this journey of creating the appropriate regulatory framework. Once we get that right, and we get it right for stable coins, which are the underpinning of the current crypto ecosystem, that's going to be a golden age for digital assets.
We're going to have to leave it there, but we want to have you back as we finally see those regulations. That's Marty Chavez, the Vice Chairman of Sixth Street Partners. Emily, back to you.
Thank you, Sonali Basak there. Coming up, Marqeta jumping in post-market trading after beating estimates for their fourth quarter earnings results, but with Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal all halting operations in Russia. What's the payments outlook ahead? Marqeta CEO and founder Jason Gardner with us next. This is Bloomberg. Marqeta just released its fourth quarter earnings, beating even the highest estimates and sending shares jumping in post-market trade. This as the payments company also announced a new partnership with Citigroup to help move commercial cards to mobile wallets more easily. But of course, there's big changes happening in the global payments landscape as Russia's war on Ukraine escalates. I want to talk about all of this with Marqeta CEO and founder Jason Gardner. Jason, good to have you back with us. So, of course, we've seen Visa, MasterCard, PayPal halting their operations in Russia. What is Marqeta's exposure in Russia, and do you have any plans to do the same?
Good seeing you, Emily, and thank you for your continued interest in Marqeta. Actually, Russia is not on our roadmap, has never been on our roadmap. In fact, we announced our partnership with Citi today in 40 markets, and Russia is not one of them. So our exposure is pretty limited. We have de minimis volume within the Ukraine. However, we operate in 39 countries today, and a number of those countries throughout Europe, but no exposure today.
What do you see, though, as the impact of global uncertainty, rising inflation, rising gas prices, prices of jet fuel on consumer spending? How is that impacting your outlook ahead?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on consumers, and consumers pay for things, whether using buy now, pay later, using Cash App, using Lydia in France, Coinbase. So we make money when when consumers or businesses spend cards at the point of sale, whether online or offline, through different modalities. It could be a physical plastic card or a tokenized card or a virtual card. They still have to buy things. So our exposure is really, will consumers continue to use buy now, pay later? Will they continue to use on-demand delivery services or expense management services? We have a strong base of revenue. We ended the year at $517 million in net revenue. And we have that strong base of customers. And let's see if they continue to spend despite all of the headwinds for them.
I'm curious what you observed when it came to spending in the fourth quarter and how that is shaping your thoughts on the outlook. Obviously, we're hopefully coming out of a pandemic, but now, what's going on in Ukraine has cast a whole nother cloud of uncertainty over the future.
Yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty. The fourth quarter, buy now, pay later, really was well beyond our expectations. It was 50% growth from even Q3, which we would kind of expect because we see consumers wanting to use new payment types like buy now, pay later in the fourth quarter. We actually did a survey last year of surveying people in both the US, UK, and Australia, and we found that 51% of people had actually used the payment modality before. We don't know if it's going to change. I mean, you're seeing a lot of the same things, unfold every minute of every day in regards to Ukraine and the war. Also, what's happening in Europe. We're heading into a lot of uncertainty, especially this summer. But again, we have this strong base of revenue, a strong base of customers who are looking to grow their businesses using our technology and our tools. We're going to help them go into even more and more geographies. And we're excited about doing that. But again, there's a lot of headwinds for not only consumers, but businesses as well.
This new Citigroup partnership, how much could this impact revenue?
So as we focused as a company, so our strategy was to start with commerce disruptors, companies like DoorDash and Instacart and Affirm and Klarna. That's where we had the DNA match with developers who were building on top of our platform. We then went into large tech giants, digital banks, and then large financial institutions. They're very slow to make decisions and roll out. We would expect over time they would take more and more advantage of our platform. But this is just our foot in the door. Tokenization as a service is something we are doing with JP Morgan today. Now we've announced with Citi within 40 markets, and that takes time to go build. But again, this is a foot in the door. We want to do more and more with large financial institutions and building that trust through us working with them directly, and our technology is going to help us go and do that.
Well, speaking of a foot in the door, how are you looking at Web3 and how do you see that driving growth in your business?
Well, we have been doing a lot in crypto, as we've talked about in the past, especially with our partnership with Coinbase. That's really our first step. This idea of decentralized finance or DeFi, or, for years I've been talking to companies about using things like blockchain to move transactions. And I actually talked about this in my remarks I just made in our Q4 of 21 earnings call. Visa and MasterCard have interconnected the world for companies, whether online or offline, that want to accept payment cards. That is very, very significant. That's a very, very deep moat and a very tall wall for companies that want to go in and build that cross-border capability that they have. So I think this technology is here to stay. We believe in it. I believe in it personally. I spent a lot of time with companies in the crypto Web3 space, decentralized finance, how we're going to go and build it. It's just going to take time. And then that could be, maybe a decade from now, we'll see the changes.
Jason Gardner, founder and CEO of Marqeta. Thank you, as always, for stopping by and getting off that call. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Thursday, we're going to speak to Flexport CEO Ryan Peterson as his company partners with international aid agencies to deliver critical supplies to refugees fleeing Ukraine. You don't want to miss it. This is Bloomberg.